Hello everyone, and welcome back to my Shaman's second episode in the Zero to Hero challenge. The goal of the challenge is to obtain a Mythic Plus rating of 2500 from an initial rating of 0 through the use of pugs only. I finished off last week with an item level of 428 and 150 Mythic Plus rating. The goal of this week is to complete the weeklies of the Emerald Dream, practice my rotation, complete as many dungeons as I can, and hopefully, once I hit 440 item level, run the amirdrassil normal raid. I'm still really quite bad at the Shaman's rotation, so upon logging in, rather than running to my vault like I usually do in these videos, I instead spent 5 minutes just practicing my rotation on the target dummies in Valdrakken. I tried to practice both the single target opener and rotation for a few minutes, and the AoE rotation. I felt like I improved a little during this time, but definitely still had more muscle memory to build when it comes to the Shaman's rotation overall. After spending a good 5 minutes practicing rotations, something that will become a part of my routine every time I log into this character from now on, I moved on to opening up my vaults. I hadn't completed too many runs last week, and they were all low level keys, and as expected my vault didn't have the greatest choices. I ended up picking a 460 item level shield due to this being on the highest item level track and the highest item level overall. This brought my overall item level up to 430. After picking up my item from the vault, I headed over to the Emerald Dream where I picked up the Worthy Ally, Super Bloom and Dream Seeds quest. Completing these three quests as quickly as I could. From these three quests I received some fairly good upgrades. The Super Bloom gave me a 444 item level cape. The Worthy Ally quest gave me a 441 wrist, and the Dream Seeds gave me a 441 neck. All very nice upgrades, bringing me up to a total item level of 435. With the weeklies out of the way, but still being sub 440 item level, I began to run my key, picking up the first players that jumped into the queue. The affixes for this week are Fortified, Storming, and Bursting. The first dungeon, a Throne of Thunders +4, a very easy key made even easier by the fact that the first tank that decided to queue up was 485 item level, making the dungeon very fast. I'm not sure why he joined up to the group, perhaps they were just bored. Either way, I wasn't going to pass up the opportunity. We only had one death throughout the dungeon whilst clearing to the third boss. One of the Faceless Watchers used his Shadow Smash ability, and the hunter didn't move away in time, getting himself killed. Other than this one death, however, the dungeon was completed very quickly, with around 20 minutes left on the timer, landing us 3 chests the dungeon, bringing my Mythic Plus rating up to 232, still a long way to go for that Keystone Hero. Immediately after finishing the Throne of the Tides, I formed another group for my upgraded key, and now Galron Fall +7. This run was messy. The first pull of the dungeon went about as poorly as it could have done. There was no conversation in regards to using Cloak to skip the first packs, and as such the Warlock and myself were caught off guard and were a little slow to move, with the Warlock not moving at all until the Cloak had expired. This resulted in all the packs getting pulled to the first boss. Needless to say, this ended up with the Warlock dying quickly as he aggroed most of the mobs, while with the tank being nowhere near, we used Bloodlust hoping we could still do the fight, but on the boss's leap ability, I just didn't manage to make it in time for the small soak before it hit the ground, causing massive damage to the group and leading to a wipe. A very interesting start to the dungeon, but fortunately no one left. After releasing, we slowly made our way to the first boss, taking just a few trash packs at a time and taking the final trash pack along with the boss. On this boss, it was here where I made a fatal mistake. I was overconfident with this being a low level key and decided I'd be able to survive the hit from the leap so that I wouldn't have to interrupt my cast. I was wrong and got one shot. I used my Ankh at this point and we proceeded to down the boss without any further incidents. With the first boss dead, we made our way into the second boss's room and began clearing. On the first pull of the room we had yet again another death. This time it was the rogue. He was quite low when the Chrono Burst debuff expired, which was enough damage to finish him off. But as this is a low level key, losing a DPS here isn't too impactful on the run overall. Once the pack was dead, the warrior immediately decided to go for a big pull without warning anyone. causing myself and the others to take aggro as proper threat wasn't established. I tried to run the mobs to the tank that I aggroed, but he continued to run ahead and I couldn't catch up. The healer fell shortly after, along with the other DPS. The tank did manage to stay alive for a while and I ran back, but the moment I was in range, I got targeted by abilities, and without a healer present, I died once again. After my death, the warrior also ended up falling, despite keeping himself alive for quite some time. This brought our total death counter up to 14 before the second boss. Without any more deaths, we reached the manifested time waves. The boss was going really well up until around 40% remaining, where I made yet again another mistake. I was targeted by the Chrono Fade ability and made sure I was stood inside a fast pizza slice of the boss. However, the debuff ended up expiring right as the slice moved, causing me to drop it in the slow section of the boss and killing myself. Shortly after my death, the healer got hit by the fragments of time, and with no one left to dispel the Chrono Faded debuff, both buffs expired at the same time, killing the warlock, just as the boss died, bringing us up to a total of 17 deaths so far in the dungeon. Whilst clearing out the trash on the way to the Blight of Galakrond, we had another death occur on the final trash packs. Our rogue dipped quite low and with the AoE damage from the risen dragons, and eventually died. Once the trash was dead, the rogue released and we pulled the third boss. Luckily, this boss died without issue, letting us continue on and clearing the trash on the way to Galakrond. We made it all the way to Galakrond without any deaths and the fight was going well. However, I was targeted by the Extinction Blast ability and ran inside Chromie's shield. This dropped me quite low and I stood inside the soak point for the Stonecracker barrage. However, it seems that I received little to no healing during the mechanic and died. The boss was already about to phase, so with everyone else they phased the boss and killed it, 2-chesting the key, bringing my rating up to 251. And I was also lucky enough to get a minor upgrade in the form of a 450 item level one-handed mace. I left the dungeon and immediately started forming a group for the next key, a +9 rise. This run went much better, I didn't fail any mechanics this time around and no one died throughout the run, allowing us to complete it very quickly, 2-chesting the key, taking my rating up to 440. I didn't get any loot this run other than a transmog fist weapon. However, our evoker didn't need the chest item he had dropped, and so without asking he gifted it to me, taking me up to 437 item level overall. Just like the previous dungeon, once I left I immediately formed a group for my new key, a +11 waycrest manor. Once again, this was an incredibly smooth run, with only one death occurring throughout the entire dungeon. The death occurred on the first big pull of the dungeon. The tank kept the adds inside the corridor, leaving not much room to move around and get away from the storming affix and other abilities. I was forced into a corner and couldn't see too much, but our rogue ended up dying, most likely from getting hit by a cleave or the etch ability. Despite the death, he released, ran back, and we finished off the pack. The rest of the dungeon was very smooth, allowing us to 3-chest the dungeon, taking my rating up to 538, and once again I was lucky enough to get some more loot, a 457 item level pair of gloves. The druid didn't need the ring he got, so me and the warrior both rolled for it, and the warrior won. This brought my item level up just enough for me to feel that I wouldn't be completely useless inside of amirdrassil normal. With that in mind, I created a group for the raid, however wasn't sure if I'd have enough time to complete the full run before I reached my 4-hour time limit. I created a group and we started the first boss in the raid. Nalroot went down very easily, although quite a bit of time was wasted waiting for everyone to gather as I had to run out multiple times to summon. When the boss fell, I rolled need on any loot I could use and was lucky enough to get a 454 item level belt. The second boss didn't fall quite as easily and was a rather messy kill. There were no deaths on the boss until we reached around the 35% remaining mark. Here, quite a few deaths started occurring. The boss used its spear ability, followed by its AoE damage from the Mark for Torment. Here is where 2 DPS fell, and another followed while soaking the circle at the bottom of the room as people got hit by the swirls from the boss. People were also hit by the frontals, which is sent out in a straight line from the boss. Eventually we got another set of spears, and these spears were stacked a bit too tightly, and as a result people got hit by multiple spears, killing another few players. Ideally you should be stacking 2 spears on the left, right and behind the boss. With half the raid dead, it was a race against time to see if we could kill the boss in the time before the group got wiped. During the next torment, the AoE damage was too much for the remaining healers and more people fell, including myself. However, the boss was in its final 3%, and with the remaining players they managed to down the boss. I wasn't lucky enough to get anything this time though. With the second boss dead, we moved on to the next one, Volcaros. This boss went down much easier, with only 1 death occurring throughout the encounter. The hunter died around 30% on the boss. I'm not sure what killed him as he was on the other side of the room, but he was the only death for this encounter, otherwise the boss fell relatively easily. Moving on to the next boss, Larodar. He was once again a very easy boss for the group to kill. Everyone respected the mechanics and he fell without giving us any trouble. I wasn't lucky enough to get any loot once again though, and was primarily hoping to get some of my tier pieces. With Larodar dead, we moved on to the next wing of the raid, and here is where we had our first wipe of the run on Council. During Airwind's Choking Vine's ability, the tank needs to direct Urktos's charge through the Dryad. However, the tank failed to aim the charge twice, allowing Airwind to finish her cast and wiping the raid. A few players left at this point and I had to refill the group, which cost me a lot of time that I didn't have, as my 4-hour time limit on the character was running out very quickly at this point. Refilling the group took about 10 minutes, and our second attempt on the council went much better. We killed the boss without any mechanical mistakes being made and no one dying, allowing us to move on to the final boss in this ring, Nimue. Nimue for the most part was a clean kill, but during the second intermission we did lose 2 DPS to the Warden's lumbering slam as they didn't move out of the way in time. Other than these 2 deaths, once again the boss fell, and this time I was lucky enough to win a roll on some 460 item level braces. With time running short and only a couple minutes remaining before I needed to log off the character for the week, I stayed for one final boss, Smolderon. Luckily, Smolderon was once again a one-shot, thankfully, as I only had time for 1 attempt on the boss before I would hit my time limit. I didn't get any loot, but at least I gained my first out of 3 items to unlock the skip to the normal mode raid. To summarize the week, I practiced my rotation, completed the weeklies in the Emerald Dream, ran 4 Mythic Plus dungeons, and killed 7 out of 9 bosses in normal amirdrassil. My rating is at 538 for the week, and my item level at 443. Next week, I'll start with the normal raid, as I would very much like to clear it with this character. That's all for this episode. If you did enjoy the video, please do give it a like, comment and subscribe, as it really does help out the channel. See you next time and have a good one.